Yeah.
Have meetings online. You can
We're setting the example here, Ron. We kicked the big boys down, yeah. Yeah.
They can hear you.
Hey, Melissa, we're going to have to sit in the audience because
Start your meeting, Gene.
and the keyboard.
Byron Stewart has joined the conference.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is March 28th. I'd like to start by reading that the Board of Supervisors may, by motion, recess into executive session to receive legal advice from the board's attorney on any item contained in this agenda pursuant to ARS 38-431-03. We'd like to start this meeting with the...
Just keep going.
like to start this
Has
meeting
joined the
with
conference.
the Pledge of Allegiance. It's a little distracting there. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll start this meeting out with Alan Tempert, our Elections Director. This will be a discussion of possible action. May approve the adoption of Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 2020-055, approving the canvass of the March 17, 2020 presidential preference election pursuant to ARS 16241. Alan?
Chairman Angus? I'm sorry, Chairman Bishop?
Yes, Jenny.
I'm looking at her and talking to you. I just need to verify, Supervisor Johnson, are you on the phone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Want to make a motion? Want to hear from Alan?
No, I make a motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Alan. Okay, the next item is brought to us by Becky O'Brien, the Procurement Director. This will be a discussion of possible action, reference approving the sole source purchase and sign the aircraft sales agreement dated March 26, 2020 with Dante Marelnell of Lake Havasu City, Arizona, for the purchase of a Cessna Model 414A twin-engine aircraft. U.S. registration number November 86 Adam Whiskey at the price of $265,000. Funding for this contract is through Mojave County Sheriff's Office RICO funds. Further authorize the chairman of the Mojave County Board of Supervisors to sign all documents necessary to complete the purchase. Okay, I'll open this up for discussion or a motion.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Johnson.
I question, are we using RICO funds, or is this from funds that have been taken from regular people?
It is my understanding that it is RICO funds, but we have the treasurer just stepping down toward the podium, and we'll have her verify that for you.
That's the finance director.
Oh, what did I say?
Treasurer. It's confusing, couple of days.
Coral, we have Supervisor Johnson on the phone. He's wanting to verify that the purchase of the Sheriff's Office aircraft is limited to RICO funds, or not.
Yes, sir, it is. That's exactly correct.
Okay.
I apologize for not being here in time for the question, but it is RICO funds.
That's okay. I apologize for giving you the treasurer's title. So, Supervisor Johnson, do you have other questions?
If that's her answer, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Anybody else? Supervisor Watson.
Chairman Bishop, I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 2, but I do have a question for the Sheriff's Department.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Watson, and I think I heard Supervisor Johnson chime in, but I'm not sure.
Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
My question is, how many pilots do we have that are dual engine, twin engine qualified?
Myself, and we have a backup pilot.
We have 2?
Correct.
Okay. That's my only question.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we do have a motion on the floor. I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes. Next item, discussion of possible action, Ray, approve on behalf of the Mojave County Information Technology Department the procurement of IntelliFlash HD 2040-100 all-flash storage system accessories and support for TransSource computers for an amount including tax not to exceed $134,019.14. Okay, do we have any discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second the motion?
Have a motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes. Next item brought to us by Supervisor Johnson. This will be a discussion of possible action. Ray, delay any previously approved building projects that have not been started yet at county facilities for 60 days. Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that we should postpone any vertical projects that we're doing. One of the reasons is that we don't know what our finances are going to be. The second one would be that the costs are changing daily for materials, and we can't get guaranteed bid.
Okay, Supervisor Johnson, I have a question. Which projects are you referring to? Do you have anything in specific in mind?
Mr. Lutowski might be able to tell us. We also have the 2 bids for the renovations that we're going to doing or the remodels.
Okay, so I'd like to hear from the county manager and our finance director in that order, please.
Madam Chairman, hopefully I'll be able to help out a little bit. Obviously, we've got the courthouse project that's underway, and my understanding is that this isn't going to impact any existing contracts that have already been awarded. We do have a project that's going to be contemplated on the next board meeting, and you all may or may not be aware, we're looking at remodeling a portion of the Lake Havasu Central County Complex, and that project came out to where it wasn't economically feasible to move forward with it in consultation with Supervisor Gould, who wanted to be reasonable on his expenses and costs for getting into a office space in the Lake Havasu building. So we redirected, and we were looking at another less expensive space to remodel that we believe we can reasonably provide. We can reasonably provide an area in that Lake Havasu complex for Supervisor Gould, and we've got a cost estimate for that that will be proposed. At the next board meeting, on the April 6th meeting, and we'd like to move forward with that because we believe that would be cost effective. It's not a huge project. It's not like something that would be greater than $100,000, us wanting to pull back because of the uncertainty that Supervisor Johnson has outlined. Regarding the animal shelter, we've tried to negotiate and we've invited a technical proposal from our #1 selected design build team, and that was rejected. So we're in the process, at least on that project, of starting all over. And I believe, what Supervisor Johnson has said regarding new buildings and new contracts, that would be a project that I would would side that we would need to suspend until at least we have some surer times. I heard Director Letowski on the line. I hope he heard some of the projects that I mentioned. I know he has a listing that he'd like to share with the board on projects that would be impacted by Supervisor Johnson if the chairman would allow.
Absolutely. Mr. Lekowski, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, Chairman Bishop.
Okay, go ahead. And
thank you, Chairman Bishop, members of the board. Besides the animal control shelter project, I also have the Bullhead City County Attorney's Office tenant improvements project. The board previously approved that at an amount of $111,775. The purchase order was issued, insurance approved, and a notice to proceed was issued, but no work has started. Also, two projects approved at the last board meeting was the Assessor's Lake Havasu City remodel at $52,500 and the Bullhead City Assessor's Furniture project at $21,750. Lastly, I'd like to inform the board that we have 3 projects under our adopted FY20 capital improvement program budget that we had planned to carry out. Now, these are parking lot maintenance projects, not necessarily vertical construction, but we have 3 of them. The administration building, resurfacing of the parking lot at approximately $70,000. The warehouse area, next to admin, at about $9,000, as well as the public defender's parking lot area, about $6,000. So that's $119,000 in projects that are under the adopted FY20 budget, and those will be the last of the capital projects that the facilities had aimed to carry out.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Letowski. If we don't have any problem obtaining material for parking lots, those wouldn't seem to be bothering me at all. But on remodels and those sorts of things, I'm understanding from construction people that the costs are varying from day to day with material. Is that going to be a problem?
Supervisor Johnson, that could very well surface. We've seen that surface on a couple of other projects. Nothing definitive yet, but the labor issue is a little bit in flux. Subcontractors have a potential issue in committing their resources, and it's really on the material side that essentially at this point we're just finding that either subs or the general contractors are very hesitant to guarantee pricing well out into the future. We're talking days instead of the usual weeks.
And for the board, those were my concerns. If we were to put these off on the bidding process, we might not have so many problems with getting people to bid on projects and guarantee their prices.
Chairman Bishop.
Supervisor Angus.
I do agree with Supervisor Johnson. I think it would be prudent for us with the unknown. Things are changing every day. To do that, it says here on the agenda item, delay any previously approved building projects that have not been started yet. And for all those reasons, I think it's a good idea. But I think that we should make it 30 days, and then in 30 days come back and reevaluate where we are, because as our president says, he wants it over by Easter. I don't know. But things are so fluid. So that would be my suggestion, is just come back for reevaluation in 30 days.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Supervisor Angus, I think Supervisor Johnson made a good distinction that he was talking about vertical construction only, correct?
Yeah.
So, you know, when you delay the horizontal construction, sometimes you're, you know, especially on the roadways, you could be causing other problems. So I'm assuming that the board's just contemplating the vertical construction. The other issue that we may have, and I'd like to get a clarification from Steve. I think I heard that there were 2 remodel projects that were awarded. Is that correct, Steve?
The board, Manager Hendricks, the board approved 2 remodel projects, but I must express that we have a hard bid, and we actually didn't award notice to proceed for the Bullhead City County Attorney's Office at $111,775. So if it's the pleasure of the board, staff could entertain still moving that project forward, provided that we have a certainty from the contractor, the general contractor, that the price is still going to be honored.
And Madam Chairman, what Steve is saying is that if a contract is awarded, we're under contract for item of work. If we delay that, projects can be delayed for acts of God. They can be delayed by the contractor. They can be delayed by the owner. This would be an owner delay, and a contractor could ask for standby time. They could ask for adjustments in the contract prices due to material increases and so forth and so on. So it might be prudent, and I'd have to bow to Steve's expertise on this one. Is it might be prudent for those contracts that we have awarded and we have a signed contract in place to allow those to go forward.
Madam Chair?
Okay, so, excuse me just a second. What vertical projects specifically are we looking at?
And when I talk, and that's obviously an engineering term, a vertical project is building construction or something to do with building. A horizontal construction is roadways or parking lots or something like that. And I believe Steve said that the Bullhead City Attorney's Office is currently under contract. Is that correct, Steve?
That is correct, Manager Hendricks. Under an actual fixed price, that price could escalate in the future, as opposed to moving ahead now under the price that we currently have. The county may, if we were able ever to terminate the contract, incur at least some nominal costs for the bonds that the contractor had to pull. And I should also emphasize that this also attends to a repair work that was important to put the building back into ability to be able to be occupied again. We had a sewer line break, sewer service line break that will be repaired as part of this project.
So Madam Chairman, if I could help with the recommendation, I think along the lines of what Supervisor Johnson has proposed, is that any proposed projects that are being contemplated that aren't under contract be suspended. Is that correct, Supervisor Johnson?
Yes.
And that any projects that are currently under contract be allowed to proceed. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, Supervisor Watson?
Thank you, Chairman Bishop. Yeah, I don't have any problem with the hard contracts that we know the data and costs on that. I think it behooves us to do the horizontal contracts on the parking lots. This is probably one of the best times that I can remember that asphalt would probably be dropping pretty severely. My other question, and it may have already been answered, but would this action preclude the ability to seek bids for the animal shelter? All we're doing is seeking bids at the moment, I believe.
And Madam Chairman, may I address that?
Certainly.
We, and Supervisor Watson is correct, our selection committee has actually reviewed the technical proposal that was submitted, and that proposal has been rejected. So our next step is to resolicit for a design build team, and we could certainly do that. That's quite a process. It's going to take several months, so that would be up to the board if you all wanted to stop that process or allow us to continue. But currently, we're looking at resoliciting for a design build team, and that's a two-step process as it is.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Those are all my concerns.
Supervisor Angus?
I also think it's best to keep, our decisions affect the contractors and that kind of commerce, that we're trying to keep the economy going in that regard. So for the ones that are already, of course, but I think it's understood. I think this is what Supervisor Johnson, the animal shelter, I didn't know where we were in that process, but not to expend, starting to build, you know. I don't know how much money we expend just to get bids and stuff like that.
Madam Chairman, for somebody to provide a technical proposal, the way the process works is we solicit interest. We get qualifications from different design-build teams. They make presentation. We make a selection of one or more of the design-build teams to submit technical proposals. Those technical proposals, because it has important information on them generally, in them generally, there's an offer to pay a stipend so that we have ownership over that material. And I believe in let's call it a $2 million project, that stipend would be between $4,000 and $5,000.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Supervisor Gold.
I think we're looking at this incorrectly. You're going to see construction job pricing fall because of a reduction. People are canceling jobs now. People are afraid. You're going to actually see a price reduction in both building materials and in labor because of that. I think we should go ahead and move forward and keep people working. We're doing more damage to the economy by this shutdown than we are seeing from the actual virus. I would recommend that we plow ahead. The last time we had a recession, you saw prices fall. Contractors used sharper pencils when they were bidding, and I think we should take advantage of that and move forward with the projects that we plan to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair, I have a question of Mr. Lutowski again.
Yes, go ahead, Supervisor Johnson.
Mr. Lutowski, the point Supervisor Gould's making is a good point, but I think the problem that I'm seeing and hearing about is the prices are not able to be guaranteed anymore because of materials. Is that what you're seeing?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Johnson, that is what we're seeing in the very near term. Now, to Supervisor Gould's point, and I shared this with staff a couple of weeks ago already, there are going to be some industries that, well, as we all know, that are so impacted by the economic conditions that they may have construction projects. I'm talking, about the service industries, gaming industry, that if they were to halt their particular projects, those contractors and their subs could possibly be released and basically hungry to keep their doors open and possibly bid projects in such a manner that provide an attractive means of going forward. But in the very short term, yes, we're seeing a pinch on supplies, probably as it's attributed to the transportation. There's just kind of a knee-jerk happening here where transportation needs to react and be able to get supplies from warehouses on over to where they need to be. So.
Thank you, Mr. Lutowski, and I have no problem and think it's probably a good idea maybe if we did the 30-day as Supervisor Angus suggested.
Okay, thank you very much. Could we hear from our finance director as to where we stand with the money? Because I understand the current year there was $5 million from the general fund that was moved over into the capital improvement fund, and we had designated $2 million for the animal shelter project and then another $3 million for the court remodel. So I'm just kind of wondering what your projected thoughts are on as far as state shared revenues and monies that'll be coming in for the next fiscal year.
Thank you, Chairman. Supervisors, yes. So that is completely correct and accurate. We did transfer over the $5 million. That was predicated, if you'll recall our conversations toward the end of last fiscal year, adopting the budget, that we needed to achieve at least $31 million essentially in our cash carryover to provide $22 to $23 million in our working capital, if you will, that would carry us through to pay the monthly bills until property taxes were received. And we needed an additional $2 million at least to ensure that our contingency remained at the $2 million. If we hit 31 million, that would be the difference between 25 million and the 31. We would dedicate $5 million of that back over into the capital projects fund from budgeted but unspent monies, one-time monies, and then $1 million in those one-time monies to improve contingency up to $3 million. At the end of last fiscal year, then we hit just about 33 million, so we were able to achieve the recommendations that you adopted in the budget for this current fiscal year. We cleared, clearly, the projection by about $2 million, so that gave us security looking into next year, into 21. If we spent $2 million on the animal shelter, would we be able to replace that portion to consider the court remodel project or other board projects? Or now, what will we do with a potential downturn, hopefully short-lived, but absolutely likely to happen with the state shared sales tax? So I don't have a huge concern with the property tax piece of that. Most of that has already been received. However, as mentioned, the state shared revenues we receive. The JLBC Financial Advisory Committee does not meet again until April 9th, so we will not have any specific information on what the state of Arizona is seeing coming in related to the allocation of those revenue streams back to counties and cities. Definitely, we should see a slight decrease. In communicating yesterday with some of the CSA staff, one of the reports that they have looked at was from the Brookings Institute, and it indicates that Mojave County employment, that there's about 18% of jobs related to the tourism industry. So if that declines for the next few months, then we would see impacts, particularly in that sales tax sector, not from the county sales tax since that's been terminated, but from the state shared sales tax going forward. So I don't have a definitive crystal ball answer other than we're going to have to be I'm going to have to be, I don't even know if I need to be more conservative than I already am. As I just spoke to, we cleared my $31 million projection by $2 million. The nature of the job, and I don't want to put you in a position of making a decision either way, too positively because of something that I've recommended, or too negatively where you're harming employment and other sectors of the economy because I've been too conservative. So I would like to say that potentially from the tourism sector that we could see a decline of 20%, but that's only a portion of those state shared revenues. So I don't know if that helps you or not, but.
Well, it helps me a lot because it tells me that we're probably better off financially than we've been in past years.
You also, have other options where we are financially with the property tax rate and the sales tax rate. If there was a more catastrophic downturn or that kind of thing, in order to just meet your required services that you have to provide. But in terms of looking at reallocating the $2 million, you have that option, of course.
Okay. Any
Madam
questions? Yeah, Supervisor Gold.
Coral, as a percentage, what is state shared revenue of our budget?
Between the state shared sales tax and the Auto tax, it's about 30%. It's a good chunk of change.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carl.
Follow-up question. The auto tax, you're talking about VLT?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's no further discussion. I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion to suspend all vertical projects for a period of 30 days, with the exception of the Bullhead City remodel.
Okay, I have a question on that. Would that exclude going out to search for a new sole project for the animal shelter? I mean, that could still go forward. I'm not sure if that's included in what you're trying to do here.
I don't believe so. They can still go out for a bid.
Okay.
And Madam Chairman, just clarification, all vertical projects that aren't currently under contract, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
I didn't catch the last remark. The vertical projects that are currently under contract shall proceed, is that correct? Okay, and
Yes.
how about the horizontal parking lots?
Those would still go ahead.
Okay, those can proceed?
Yes.
So I'm still not clear as to what we're stopping. Are you supervising
Madam
this?
Chair?
Do you understand what? Yeah, it's just not clear what these vertical projects are that we're.
Madam Chairman?
Mr. Latowski could probably explain better, or Manager Hendricks.
Okay, Mr. Hendricks is at the podium, so.
And I'll ask Director Latowski to help me if I leave out anything, but basically, we would be suspending Supervisor Gould's remodel. We would be suspending the two, that's in the Lake Havasu Central County Complex. We'd be suspending any activity on Assessor Kinch's 2 remodel requests. And we would be continuing with the procurement process for the animal shelter. And Steve, did I leave out anything?
Manager Hendricks, no, and with regard to Supervisor Gould's office, we have not moved ahead with the original alternative to locate that in the Public Works Facilities warehouse, and we were going to bring to the board at the next meeting another alternative for the board to consider.
Yes, that's the new alternative is what I was referring to, because I did mention to the board that we were bringing another option forward. Which would, I think, would entail an architect and then it being designed and then bid out.
That is correct.
Okay.
So what's the motion?
Chairman Bishop, Supervisor Angus, the motion is to suspend all vertical projects that aren't currently under contract for 30 days, with the exception of the Bullhead City project and the parking lots. Correct, Supervisor Johnson?
Yes, Madam Clerk.
Okay, and we need a second.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, the motion's been seconded by Supervisor Watson. Any further discussion?
Yes, please. And is that for 30 days? Do we have a time limit?
30 days.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Okay, the ayes have it. Motion carries. Okay, next item, also Supervisor Johnson brought this to us, discussion of possible action, Ray, put a freeze on any non-essential new hires for the next 60 days. Is there any
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's kind of self-explanatory. I think we need to watch our money. We have no idea where the economy is going, and we would still be able to hire all the people that we need to handle the emergencies.
Okay. Any discussion or a motion?
I have a
Supervisor
question.
Watson.
Thank you, Chairman Bishop. Supervisor Johnson, in your thought pattern here, would non-essential hirees be included in the road department, or is that an essential department?
Is it like the governor's list?
It's vague.
I would leave that up to the manager.
Okay, so we're going to give some leeway to the, to the directors to determine who is essential and not essential?
Yes, I believe if they brought it before us and they had a good reason, then we would approve it.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Angus.
Would Supervisor Johnson amend it so it, again, will come back in 30 days and reassess because things can change a lot in 30 days? Just to get a report and see where we are? Or you think 60 is reasonable?
I have no problem with 30. I think we're going to be in the midst of a bigger problem in 30 days, but that's no deal breaker for me.
Right. Well, I'm fine with it because it's really at the discretion of the county manager. So I'm fine with it.
I'm okay with 30.
With 30? Okay. So what is it now, 60 or 30 in the motion?
What's the motion?
We don't have a motion.
I'd make a motion to approve the item with a 30-day.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Johnson.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Gold. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The next item brought to us by Supervisor Angus, discussion of possible action, Ray, recent issues, actions, events, and county responses regarding COVID-19.
Thank you, Chairman Bishop. I just put this on yesterday morning just so it would give us the ability, if a supervisor had anything to say or ask about what's going on. Things have changed in the last 24 hours, 48 hours. So for me, the one thing I think that hasn't been clear, and it hasn't been clear on any of the state or federal issue, is parks. So can we just have an update on where we are with our parks? Because people ask me that a lot.
Also, Chairman Bishop, Supervisor Angus, just for your knowledge, I believe that Denise Burley is on the phone and so is Byron Stewart.
Good.
So just so you guys are aware.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Hendricks.
And Madam Chairman, we obviously have our Public Works Director here who is in charge of our personal parks, but I had a conversation with him this morning, and what he's relayed to me is that our parks are currently open. We've shut down all rec areas or all places that would accommodate gatherings of over 10 people as a group, to be rented out. And we're no longer renting out that. Our residences are still open. We did have a conversation that we were under the understanding and knew that the National Park Service was looking at shutting down the Arizona side of the National Park Service to include Catherine Landing, and they decided not to do that at this time. But we're going to watch that very closely, and it possibly would be a trigger that we would be looking at to come back in front of the board at that time if the Arizona side was shut down, and ask the board to go ahead and allow us to shut down Davis and in the meantime. But I'm glad the board is having this discussion. If there's any interim things that you'd like us to look at, we would certainly be wide open to whatever the board's direction is.
Okay, Mr. Hendricks, the governor wasn't in his proclamation that he wanted to keep parks and trails open in the state of Arizona. So can we go against what he's put out there as a county?
Madam Chairman, I believe what you're looking at is his Directive 12.
Yes.
And that was my understanding too. But I would have to defer to Ryan, but I believe you as chairman have broad authority over certain things because the emergency was declared for Mojave County. So if we believe that it was in the best interest of our citizens to do certain things, I believe you have the authority to do that.
Okay. Ryan, could you confirm that?
Madam Chair, members of the board. The governor issued Executive Order 220-12, and in that, what he did was he listed items that are essential services, and then he went through and identified a number of essential services and businesses that shall remain open or shall remain functioning, so to speak. And specifically in the order, it says, and it states no county, city, or town may make or issue any order, rule, or regulation that restricts or prohibits any person from performing any function designated by the governor or the other persons there as an essential function. So you go through those items, and the county is prohibited from restricting or regulating those items. So as far as a park is concerned, the county would not be able to close a park. Now, that being said, the county can impose reasonable guidelines and things. For example, they can say, hey, try to impose social distancing, try to ensure the safety of the well-being, and so forth. But the declaration makes clear that no county, city, or town may make an issue or an order, a rule, or regulation that restricts or prohibits those essential functions.
Okay,
Madam
thank you. Supervisor Gold?
Yesterday, that question came up in the conference call with the county supervisors and the governor's staff, and the governor's staff said that if the counties chose, they could shut the parks down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't participate in that.
That might have been his opinion,
Sure.
and not backed by law, though. So.
No, I'd be happy to look at that. I'm just reading what the plain words on this declaration are.
Sure.
And park is clearly outlined in that, but I certainly will look into that, Supervisor Gould.
And then Mr. Esplin, that does not include national parks. That's federal, correct?
No, this doesn't apply to the federal, and it specifically excludes federal agencies. So the federal government will have their own different restrictions and rules.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Angus?
I think the operative word is restrict in this, because we're not looking to shut them down, but I know that Coconino is restricting the number of people who can go into the parks that they can control like that. Obviously, there are a lot of places where that just can't happen. And I think that's something that we should look into. Can I ask a question of Steve Latosky?
Can I just jump on that?
Sure.
I think the idea is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to ensure the safety of the people, and that'd be an example where we are keeping the parks open. We are fulfilling the intent of the proclamation, the proclamation being that we want to allow these essential services to go forward, but also we want to ensure the safety and health of the public. So I would see that as something that would be reasonable.
Mr. Latosky, did you see an influx of people last weekend come in? Because Supervisor Watson had the idea last meeting, and he turned out right, that there's going to be a lot of people coming from California and Nevada, where they are very restricted. They're going to see our wide open spaces and our more lax restrictions. And I've been told, I was told by Park Service that they saw a huge increase at Catherine's Landing last week. Have we seen the same?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Angus, a couple things. One, I was actually at Davis Camp. I believe this was Saturday or Sunday, but nonetheless during the middle of the day. We have not yet seen an influx of day-use visitors at Davis or Wallapai. However, with the weather turning warmer and going into next month, that's always a possibility. You are correct with regard to the attendance at Catherine Landing, and do understand that the Lake Mead National Recreation Area has now since been closed on the Arizona side, and I did catch in the press where there was seemingly an influx of persons that were attempting to frequent some of the national parks and other federal parks across at least the western area. But we have not, and I want to be clear, we have not yet seen any significant uptick in visitors, patrons to our regional parks. But we will certainly monitor the situation. We certainly could see something to that effect unfold as we go into next month.
Okay.
And Chairman, if I can just add, if you look at the specific provision about parks in the executive order, it states any outdoor recreation area, park, site, or trail that provides opportunities for outdoor recreation with social distancing, such as walking, hiking, and biking. So I think the intent here was that they continue to utilize social distancing in those parks.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Bishop?
Mr. Watson?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman Bishop. My concern this morning is for our public lands, and what recommendation would you have for us to suggest reasonable guidelines for those folks that come in with recreational vehicles on our public lands? I discussed this item with Amanda Dodson from the BLM the other day, and we came up with an idea of making sure that those recreational vehicles, camping and whatnot, that those sites be at least 50 feet apart. And would that be a reasonable recommendation that we could post?
Well, it'd be a reasonable recommendation to give to the BLM. The BLM will govern their own lands and decide what it is, but I absolutely think that's a very good, reasonable explanation. As far as anything that we would recommend, obviously that they follow all CDC guidelines and the public health guidelines, those guidelines that have been issued by the state to ensure that we limit the spread of any kind of viruses or anything like that.
Well, my concern is because the temperature is soon to increase to about 70 to 80 degrees in different parts of Mojave County. We may see an influx of a number of people coming from neighboring states, and I think we need to be on top of this and be prepared in case there are a large number of people on the north side and the south side of Lake Havasu City, as well as up and down the Colorado River. Those are just my concerns.
I think those are valid concerns, and I think we want to be good partners with the BLM. So the BLM, and also there's the state trust lands. You want to be in contact with the state, so that we're ready for it, so that we can work with the BLM and work with the state trust lands, so that when those come down, that we could be able to help be the solution. Absolutely. So now is the time to get ready for it.
Chairman Bishop?
Go ahead.
So if we see it this weekend, let's say we see an incredible increase of people coming, Chairman Bishop has the authority to put restrictions on the parks, should that happen. It's like we have things that we can do, so we're just taking a wait and see.
We have some things that we can do. However, we cannot go against what the governor has declared. Governor is the top of the state, the executive director. He's the executive branch of the state.
I'm just saying restrictions.
I know, and I'm not saying that we can't do restrictions. What I'm saying is that we have to follow what that order is and be within those guidelines. We have an order. We stay within those guidelines. Within those guidelines, the chairman can say, okay, implement social distancing, encourage social distancing, do those things that are necessary, that are following the CDC guidelines, following the public health guidelines, following those guidelines and those things. Those are the things that the chairman can do and say, hey, we're going to limit the amount of people at certain times. For example, like what Yavapai has done. Yavapai has not closed down the parks, but Yavapai has said, well, we're going to limit it to this amount of people at certain times, and we're going to stagger things or things like that. That's what I would look at, and that's what I'd recommend. But I certainly would not close down the parks, because that would be contrary to what the governor has ordered.
I'm not talking about closing down.
Sure,
Madam
I'm
Chair,
not suggesting that.
Okay. Supervisor Johnson?
Do they have the ability to turn visitors to parks away if they're showing signs of the virus?
I don't know the answer to that. That's more of like a public health function, and I'd have to consult with public health, because, you know, the public health has certain authorities that they can do. I imagine that they could, but I can't say definitively without researching that. But that's a very good question, Supervisor Johnson. My gut likely says yes, they can. Again, going back to what Supervisor Angus has pointed out, we are not closing the park. Instead, what we'd be doing is we'd say, hey, we want to make sure the safety of the people. So I imagine that yes, they could, but I would double check that, Supervisor Johnson.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Do we have Denise Burley on the line that could chime in on that?
I am on the line. Could you repeat the question for me, please?
Yeah, Supervisor Johnson is wanting to know
I can repeat the question. Supervisor Johnson wants to know if park officials, park rangers, anybody, the park employees, if they could turn away people if somebody is showing signs that they are sick or ill. My opinion to that, if you didn't hear it, was I believe they can, but I would obviously double check that just to be sure. But that's the question.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think I need to do more research on that as well. I mean, we hope people are making responsible decisions when they're sick, not to be out in public, but recognizing that that doesn't always occur, we, I think, I think I need to also research that same question for you. So, Brian, can I get with you on that after the phone call?
Yeah, certainly we'll consult with it, but here's my logic, here's my thinking. You know, we can put restrictions, for example, on our buildings, and we've done that to limit the face-to-face contact. We are open for business, we are working, we are assisting the public, we're making sure the public's needs are met. But if somebody had signs that they are sick, then in our own buildings, we have said, you know, you cannot come in our building. I think the same principle would apply to the park. The challenge you're going to have is that, you know, park officials are not health officials. They don't decide, or they can't determine whether somebody is sick or not. You know, what if somebody just has allergies? And so it's hard to say, you know, if somebody sneezes, does that mean that they can't be admitted to the park? No, that's not what I'm suggesting, and that's not what I'm saying. And that's the challenge, is that you have people who their business is running a park. It's not diagnosing and determining whether somebody is ill or not. So that to me is the real challenge. I think it would only be it'd be in a very unusual, very limited circumstance where someone is obviously ill. But I think it'd be a very unlikely scenario.
I agree. I think the subjectivity of illness at this point in time with flu season, allergy season, and COVID is really difficult to discern the symptoms and separate them out and say what is what. So even a medical doctor is struggling with that question at the moment. So I see trying to ask a park ranger or park staff to do that as being very unrealistic at that point.
Yeah, I agree.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Steve Lasowski. Just want to point out that we undertook yesterday and already have them deployed a custom large social distancing sign that we're placing at the entrances of our parks as well as the main ingress and egress roads. It was something we just took on and punched out literally yesterday afternoon. They look fantastic. And as well, and this would defer to possible future considerations, certainly Attorney Esplin's evaluation, but parks would not have any difficulty managing restriction for parks entry, say to Arizona residents only with the presentation of a Arizona driver's license. Provided that would be permissible by law, that's something that parks could adapt to while still keeping our parks open.
I doubt that you're going to have, I would not recommend to limit it to just Arizona residents. You're going to run into some serious legal problems with that. I don't recommend doing that. That's not a reasonable restriction. I think you're looking more of, we're restricting to the number of people to ensure social distancing, to ensure the safety of the public, not closing the park, but to do it limited based on a person's driver's license and whether they're a resident, I don't think that's going to fly.
Madam Chair, we're already restricted. I'm sorry.
Madam Chair? Supervisor Watson had his hand up first.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question for Mr. Esplin. And I think we touched on this a little bit yesterday. What enforcement do we have for businesses that are flagrantly violating these suggestions from the governor?
Sure. So there's two different parts to this. There's the governor's authority, then there's also the public health authority. Under the governor's authority, the governor has declared a state of emergency. Once the governor has declared a state of emergency, the governor has the police powers to do certain things. Among those police powers is the power to shut down businesses that the governor deems are non-essential. We've seen that already. He's issued two different executive orders 2029 and 2012. And in 2029, that's the one where that pertains to the restaurants. That's the one that says in-person dining or in-seating dining is prohibited, and to allow the takeout, carry-out, delivery, and so forth. So the governor has that authority to impose those. Under those same provisions, law enforcement, so the law enforcement agencies, the Sheriff's Department, the Police Department, the County Attorney's Office, the Arizona Attorney General's Office, they have the authority to enforce that. And if any person violates that, it is a crime, it is a misdemeanor offense, and they could be arrested, it could be prosecuted under that provision. There is also, under the public health realm, there are public health authorities and regulations that they would have. I can't speak very well to that. I don't advise the public health as much, but I'm sure there are some under the public health. But specifically under the governor's authority, there is authority to enforce it through law enforcement, and if people violate it, it is a criminal offense.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Okay, Supervisor
To that
Angus.
point,
Supervisor Angus is next.
I just want to clarify, just getting back to the parks for a second, we already are limiting because we closed down the Wallapai cabins that were 10 or more. So we've already done that. And I asked our CSA while we've been speaking, and he thinks that the governor's edict would allow limiting numbers of people as well.
And I do too. I'm not saying that it doesn't. I'm just saying, we just got to make sure we follow the governor's edict and that we work within those parameters, is what I'm saying. So,
Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Gold.
thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Esplin, our Emergency Powers Act that was granted by the Board of Supervisors in, 99, gives those same powers to the chairman of the Board of Supervisors to close businesses, to close roads, and to direct law enforcement.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
But I will add, if you look at Executive Order 12, the governor specifically says that counties and cities are restricted from doing certain things, and so we have to follow that as well. It's kind of complicated.
Anybody else?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Johnson.
I would propose a motion to go into executive session to discuss remote quarantining procedures.
A motion to go into, say your motion again. Motion for executive
Motion
session.
for executive session to discuss quarantine procedures.
And if I could just clarify, that would be quarantine procedures as it relates to item number 6, the recent issues, actions, events, and county responses regarding COVID-19. If the board wishes, they can do that. We've agendized it that we could go into executive session by motion if that's the board's wishes.
Second.
Okay, Supervisor Johnson, did you want to add that to your motion?
Yes,
Okay.
with the permission of the clerk.
Do I need to restate my second? Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, we'll adjourn into executive session.
We just do it here. Jenny, would you do it
Jenny?
here?
Supervisor Johnson?
You called me on a house phone.
Sure.
Byron Stewart has left the conference.
Remain here.
this meeting back to order, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
A motion, a second. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Close.
Bravo.
Yay.